and then start following her online, and then from Abby sharing things, getting to meet Brandon online as well. But Abby, you have quite the social media following. How did that come about?
That's a good question. I don't know. I started a blog back in 2008 when I was pregnant with my first son, Beckham. And I kind of just started that at the time to just like share out with family. I thought my mom and maybe my aunts would be my only readers. And then when the year that I had Beckham, 2008, was also the year that I got my first teaching job. So about 6 weeks after Beckham was born, I was offered a kindergarten teaching position. And I got hired, I think 48 hours before open house. So it was one of those situations, you know how that works out.
Uh-huh.
So I just walked in there with my 6-week-old and I was like, let's do this. Fortunately, it was only part-time. But nevertheless, I started blogging a lot about teaching. And as I was blogging about teaching and engaging with readers there, it just kind of I'm not really sharing about Beckham anymore and our family, but I'm sharing a lot more about education. So I kind of split into two. So Babbling Abby was my original blog where I blogged family stuff. And then I moved over to the Inspired Apple, but then I still kind of stayed Babbling Abby because that's how everybody knew me.
Mm-hmm.
And so once teachers kind of took over the internet, you know what I mean? When they started taking over Facebook and Instagram, and lots of teachers had blogs, Babbling Abby just kind of stuck. And so that was kind of how I, started on Instagram and with a bunch of teachers, following me there and me following a bunch of amazing educators there. I feel like those teacher best friends, I've met everybody on the internet, which is so funny. It's an interesting thing.
No, that's so true. You make all these really great friends online through these social media platforms. And then when you meet them in person, you're like, whoa, you're just as cool as you were online. And we're friends, and this is our first time meeting, and it's all weird and everything, but it's still pretty awesome too.
Exactly what it's like.
Now, Brandon, you're pretty active on social media as well, especially Instagram. And now, when did you start utilizing Instagram?
I started using Instagram probably about a year ago. And it's when my story came out, having bipolar disorder. Mm-hmm. And I told a little bit about, actually everything, about my story from being diagnosed at 17 years old up until the year of 2016 of when I was hospitalized multiple times for bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and paranoia. And I decided to just write a blog and share it out on Facebook and Instagram.
Now, as educators, a lot of the conversation we always have is being nervous, putting our ideas out there. And so starting with you, Abby, did you ever have that kind of fear of, okay, is this even worth putting up on social media when it comes to my work stuff?
Education-wise, I really just feel like I've always kind of been an open book, and there were so many teachers that inspired me, and that I wouldn't have been the teacher that I was without their inspiration, that I felt like, I might have something to contribute to other educators that they might be interested in. And writing has kind of always been a hobby for me, as well as creating. And so it just kind of seems natural to mesh them together and to be able to share out that way. And my name is Babbling Abby. I really love to talk.
She's a talker.
Sorry, just shut me up if you need to. But I love connecting with people that way. I love to talk to other people. I think other people are so inspiring. And like I said, I wouldn't be the educator, the mom, the wife that I am today, I feel like without those type of interactions.
So, Brandon, I want to dive a little bit into the bipolar, depression, anxiety. But before I do, since we're talking about being on social media, what was that whole precipice that made you feel like you were ready to share some of your story online, and not only do it, but do it in such a open and honest way?
What made me feel like I could do that? To be honest with you, I was so sick of hiding it. I felt like I was just hiding in the shadows. I was uncomfortable talking to people because I felt like they knew something about me. So I was just like, I'm telling all. That was it. I was telling everything. So that was it.
And Abby, you have also been really open recently. Well, I've seen it recently. Maybe it's been longer than that, but about the journey as well through your own social media platform. When did you decide that you were going to not only have this Babbling Abby side of things, but also share some of your personal life on your social media as well?
Like Brandon, I think I too became really tired of hiding because with all the struggles that we went through as a married couple and that I watched Brandon battle very much silently, I just felt like it was time to like take the veil off and be like, this is who we are, and unapologetically so. Like, we've endured a lot of stuff, and I felt like sharing out with people makes other people feel like they can share too, and that we couldn't be the only people that have struggled with mental illness or that have struggled in our marriage or so many different things. But I just knew that we weren't alone, but that there were a lot of people that were probably also feeling isolated. And I hated the feeling of isolation. I hated feeling like I'm the only one that's going through this and we have to hide because this is taboo and it's messy and nobody really wants to dig into this garbage that we're going through. But I realized by sharing and connecting with others that not only were people incredibly supportive, but they had their own stories to share too. Because so many people have reached out to us and said, oh my gosh, us too. And that's really encouraging. And I just feel like society is getting a lot better about it not being taboo, but we still have a long way to go. You know, we still use words like crazy and scary and loony and that kind of stuff, especially when it comes to mental illness. And part of, I feel like our platform together is kind of like saying, no, actually not. Like, you're normal. It's okay to not be normal.
Yeah, well, whatever normal is.
Whatever normal is.
Yeah.
So Brandon, I want to talk to you a little about your journey. So you said you were diagnosed fairly young. What was that process like?
Gosh, I don't know. It was basically, I went to a few different doctors, psychiatrists, and no one really diagnosed me until I came to the psychiatrist that I see now. I was displaying things such as rage, aggression. I don't know what else. Depression, obviously. I was displaying depression. And finally, he just gave me a diagnosis as bipolar disorder. And that's just where it started.
And Abby, you know, how long have you two been together?
Do you know what? That's a crazy question. We're going to answer it and you're going to be like, no way. It'll be 20 years in December.
Wow.
So we've only been married for 12 and a half. We started dating in high school. So he asked me out on my 16th birthday, like,
Yes.
you know, all good boys should.
Right.
He asked me out on my 16th birthday, and we we dated and didn't date and dated and didn't date until he put a ring on it and we got married in 2006. So yeah, we've been around each other. We've basically grown up together.
Yeah.
So longer together than apart.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. You know, so Abby, you know, as somebody who was in a relationship with him, as the girlfriend, the fiance, the wife, all those elements, and knowing while he was dealing with some of this, did you see telltale signs? I mean, obviously these things aren't going to be hidden, but when did it become a point where you two felt comfortable talking about it with each other? Because I know that's probably a lot of things that couples are. If one person's recognized something, you know, they don't always feel comfortable bringing it up. When did you two start having that conversation that there might be something that we need to seek help for?
So I would say, like, high school, it's hard to like look like pre-college years about all of that stuff because so much of it was just like young love drama kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I mean, there was some times in high school where the way that he behaved or the way that he acted, I wouldn't classify as normal. And I could see like the rage and jealousy a little bit and anger, but all of that kind of, you know, was just like the angsty teen part.
Right.
And then Brandon was stable for a very, very, very long time. And I wouldn't say that he was like living his best life. Like I still don't, you know, he was still just kind of floating through, you know, coasting through life or whatever. Yeah. And so we had Beckham in 2008. That's our oldest. He's 10. And I would say that things, you know, he was doing fine. Like
I was still medicated also. I was still taking medication for the depression. Stuff.
Right. And then I would say we adopted a little girl, our daughter Faith, in 2013. And then we very shortly after got pregnant after not thinking that we could get pregnant again in 2015. So we had 2 little ones. And our daughter had a lot of medical needs. She was in the NICU for about 5.5 months and came, you know, several near-death experiences. But anyway, all of that was a really big trigger for Brandon. just like the stress and the anxiety and like almost, you know, watching your child die several times, like right before your eyes.
I was holding her actually while some of that happened. It was just nuts.
And because we had never seen, like a full-blown psychosis, I guess you would say, I didn't really recognize it as such. So that brings us kind of up to like 2016. And if you followed our story, we just talk about 26 as like the worst year of our entire lives, of our entire marriage, I should say. It was a really bad year.
Yeah, it was tough.
But anyway, even when all of that came about, like Brandon was extremely depressed. He was extremely anxious. All of that kind of was like this perfect storm for paranoia. He had all these triggers that I didn't at the time recognize as triggers. I was just like, he's a terrible husband. Like, he's awful. What did I do? Why are we married? Here I am with 3 young children, one who is medically fragile, the other is an infant. And we did seek marriage counseling in 2015. So right before Benny was born. But I think that like, I'm just such like.
But the thing too, like she said that we saw a marriage counselor. The thing is, like, when you go into counseling, you have to be in the right state of mind. You can't be, you can't be extremely depressed and go into counseling and think that things are going to work out because you're not thinking correctly.
Right. And our therapist told us too, because we saw a marriage counselor a couple years after that like the individual has to be right in their mind before you can like work on your relationship together, which was huge for us. Right. But I would say that, getting back to the original question of when did we start having conversations about Brandon's mental health, I would say it wasn't. I mean, Brandon had a suicide attempt, and I don't know if you know that about him or not, but he had a suicide attempt in August of 2016, and it probably wasn't until then, that level of desperation where I was able to look at him as being really sick. Like if you were looking at somebody with cancer, they would have physical ailments and, they might endure chemo but like with Brandon, it was really hard for me to differentiate and be like, his brain is really sick,
Because it's not seen. So, yeah.
So it took a long time. I mean, that was year 10 of our marriage. It took a long time for me to recognize that mental illness was not that I ever really didn't think it was a real thing. Right. Just like the depth of just how ill he was.
It wasn't real to you yet until that happened.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And Brandon, leading up to 2016, did you feel like, I think there's something wrong? And were you kind of trying to hold it in and control it and not have those conversations with Abby? Or how were you handling your side of things throughout all this?
I always felt like there was something wrong with me because since I was 17 years old, I was seeing a psychiatrist. Most people, well, I don't know really exactly how people think about what they think about that. But for me, like, I just thought crazy people saw psychiatrists and took medication. So throughout that time, I was seeing a doctor, seeing a therapist, and taking medication. And my medications were changed regularly. I was on like some of the same medication for years, but they would still change them.
It's such a guessing game, like finding the right combination that's gonna, give the right chemicals to fix those imbalances. So that was like that process took forever.
It did, especially in 2016 and 2017. That it took a very long time with many, many changes of the medication to get things right. So where I could be like what I am today, and that's successful.
Were you open with Abby throughout the struggles of dealing with the depression, or did you try to hold some of that in?
I held that in. I didn't tell her what I felt. She just saw me, while we were married, she just saw me taking medication for depression. That's basically what it was. So that's.
And I think that like, in 2016, like, especially at the beginning when like the slow kind of like, spiral down, I don't know that he necessarily recognized it either. Right. Because I think that a lot of what he was feeling was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was a lot of like, we shouldn't be married. Like, this is all marriage related. Yes. I don't like Abby. She doesn't like me. Instead of, it was just, I don't think that you saw it either. And so I don't even think there was anything for us to have like a cordial conversation about. because we didn't recognize the signs of where things were going.
I just thought things weren't working out.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
So what was the turning point where you realized that there is seriously a mental issue here that we want to get help with? Was it the suicide attempt, or was there something else that y'all two were like, okay, this is more than just we don't like each other or this marriage isn't working kind of thing?
I think it was pre-suicide attempt.
For you, it probably was.
Yeah,
because he admitted himself to the hospital.
I could tell things were going downhill fast with me. I mean, I was like, in my mind, I was sitting there thinking that I wanted to cut. You know, I wanted to do that. I can't really think of anything else that I wanted to do.
He would leave, he would leave me and kids. And we live in the northernmost part of Kentucky, so right outside of Cincinnati. And he would just drive south. The only way that I would know where he was is because I would monitor charges to our debit card, to see where he was. And I'd be like, oh, he's in Tennessee or, whatever. Right. So there were signs there. But again, from my perspective, I was like, well, this just must be what people do when they're on the brink of divorce. They must leave their wife at home with the 3 little kids, and they must yell. We must argue all of the time. I just didn't really have a good grasp of what exactly I was looking at because, and I, again, not that I want to defend my actions or make it sound that way, but Brandon was not working at the time. So I was full-time mom, full-time working from home and, raising our 3 kids and trying to keep some stability there for him or keep some stability there for them. And so I was just angry at Brandon. Mm-hmm. I was just why me? Why are you leaving me to do all of this stuff? And seeing, just thinking it was all had to do with him and nothing to do with what was going on up here.
And so, y'all been really open about this. How does the rest of your family come into play with all this? Were they involved in this process too? Are they stop talking about family business publicly? How do they feel about it all?
I'll talk about my family and you can talk about your family. My family was very supportive of Brandon getting healthy for sure. Because they were very supportive of me and whatever my desires were, that's what they wanted. So I was pretty adamant that I wasn't going to leave Brandon. Now that's not to say that the thought didn't go through my mind or that I didn't consider divorce, because that all happened for sure. But I eventually came to the point, I think by the 3rd time Brandon was hospitalized for the suicide attempt is when I was like, okay, he's really, really unhealthy. And I started seeing a therapist too, which was very helpful to me because it wasn't after Brandon came out of the hospital from the suicide attempt that things were just boom, done. It wasn't like that at all. It was a really, really, really high mountain to climb after that. But yes, my family just kind of was whatever you want, Abby, is what we're going to support you and the kids in. And then with being so public with our story, I mean, I think my family has largely been supportive. I feel like for the most part, we have had a lot of support as far as that goes.
Yeah. My family wants to see me at my best. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing is with my family is that they, aside from my story, they have seen the absolute worst with me, just like Abby has, but they've seen it also. And they, I believe, would rather it not be put out into the open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would. Nope. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And Brandon, sometimes I found through having these conversations that when people struggle with mental illness, they still sometimes deal with a lot of self-blame and feeling like this is completely my fault that they're having to go through this, that they're having to deal with this, and if I could just get my act together, those kind of feelings inside. Did you find and do you find yourself struggling with some of that too? And how do you work through that?
What do you mean struggling with what?
Well, in some of the other conversations we've had with other people when they've talked about either depression or addiction or any of those kind of things, it's a lot of blaming themselves and feeling like everything's their fault when they really can't help it. It's an imbalance. It's not something like you can just decide one day, I'm not going to be like this anymore, and then it's changed.
Right. Yeah. I'd say that I have felt like it was my fault, but after I thought about it for a while, I realized that there is something I don't want to say not right with my brain, but there's something different about my brain. and it doesn't work the way a quote unquote normal person's brain works. So I need medication to help that. And so that's really.
And I remember too, one time when Brandon went on this very, very, very long walk in the summertime.
Oh my gosh.
Like when he was like, just like left one day.
Yeah.
It was like, I mean, he was gone for hours upon hours. And when I finally found him, he was like walking on the side of the road, sweat drenched. And I was like, you need to get in the car. Like, you need to get in the car. I'm going to take you home. And he said to me, he said, I don't want to be with you. Like, I don't want to do this. No, you guys don't deserve this.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that you had some feelings of like, I don't want to take you through all that I'm going through.
Well, yeah. I mean, I did.
And especially where the kids came into play.
Yeah. I didn't want them to, I didn't want them to have to. I didn't want them to have to see me like that.
Right. Well, let me try to move us forward. I know it's a difficult conversation, and I appreciate y'all's. You're making me over here emotional too. Appreciate y'all's vulnerability and honesty as well. Abby, I'll ask you. The kids have been through this process as well, and you've got a 10-year-old. You said, right?
Yep.
How much of in this process are they involved?
Ben and Faith. Pretty much, we cannot, I don't want to say not include them, but they were so small when all of this was happening. I just don't really think they would even have any recollection of any of that. Beckham, when Brandon was going through all of that, we were very guarded, but we did let him know, Daddy's brain is so sick that he had to go to the hospital. Right. Because the kids went and visited him. We all went together and got to visit him, in a tiny 5x5 room. And it, of course, wasn't our most shining moment as a family, but he wanted to see the kids and the kids missed him. And, but yeah, so Beckham definitely has some knowledge. Does he know the extent of everything? No. And we have had conversations. We've talked to his pediatrician about when is the right time to explain everything in detail. And so for us right now, we say words like anxiety or depression, and we have frequent conversations about that with Beckham. We don't try to hide anything at all. But we've also kind of tested the waters with words like suicide, just to see what he knows about it and to see if he has any interest in learning about it. And he's not quite there yet. And so we're not gonna push that on him. Yeah. And we've just made the decision that when the time is right and when he is asking more questions about that kind of stuff, that we will be forthcoming, because again, we have 2 biological children, both are boys, and there is a genetic component to mental illness. And if we hit it and acted like it was some taboo thing, that could prevent our boys from getting help that they might need someday. And we stay in like I said, pediatricians are very aware of our circumstance and genetics, and they know the type of questions and the signs to look out for. And I feel like we do too. Yeah. So.
Well, and one thing too that I was going to ask was, our say is you both have I think one really powerful thing that's helped you through this is it doesn't seem like you've ever shied away from seeking professional help, whether that was a psychiatrist, a counselor, getting medical people involved. Has that always been something that's been easy for you all to say, this is more than we can handle, we need some professional help? Because I think that's where so many people out there who struggle with these things don't get the help because they're too embarrassed to go see a counselor or a therapist or a psychiatrist.
Right. I don't care, man. If I need help.
Now you don't.
Now I don't. That's true. But now, after 2016, there's no doubt in my mind that if something was going wrong, I'm going to go see somebody to talk to them.
Right. And I feel the same way too. And I am, I'm pretty in tune to Brandon and his moods and whatnot and our relationship. And I feel like we openly discuss both now. If I notice a change in Brandon, then I'm bringing it up to him, and he can either reassure me and be like, oh no, things are good and I'm fine, or he might say something like, we need to fix this or we need to talk about it. We have tons of open conversations about that. I mean, I feel like we talk about not like a sit down specific conversation about mental health, but we are very in tune to all of that. And I think there was a time when both of us were like, I don't want to say anti-therapy because that's not the right word, but inhibited. We didn't, it wasn't our mine was, you know, like, I've got this, I can handle this. I can handle anything that comes my way. I don't need any external help. But especially after 2016, I realized just how important that can be to seek help, to find somebody with an objective opinion that isn't your family or your best friend. It was extremely helpful for me. And we were actually just talking about this today with therapists. Like, they're not like a forever thing. Now, psychiatrists, doctors, yes, 100%. Yeah. But you don't necessarily have to see a therapist forever, because Brandon's in school right now, actually, for mental health and addictions. And he said that he was learning in his classes, like, you know, it's not like you go to a therapist thinking, I'm going to be with you for the next 20 years. It might just be 6 months. Like in my case, it was about 8 months that I needed to see somebody and, you know,
just to work some things out.
Yeah, work some things out and process things with somebody else.
So Brandon, talk to me about the last 2 years. What has your journey been like since that episode and really trying to get better yourself?
So initially it was awful, but now it's great. Like Abby said, I'm going to school. I'm a stay-at-home dad right now, so I get to spend a lot of time with my kids. Yeah, you know, and I don't know what else I really.
Like recently, you're going to go see a therapist.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Actually, I
have an ongoing struggle with anxiety. That's Brandon's number one thing is definitely anxiety.
So actually, I called up the therapist that we saw together and asked him. I was like, dude, is it okay if I come see you? He's like, absolutely. I was like, that's great because I'm freaking out over here. But really, I mean, the past 2 years, it's been, I'd say I'd say the majority, it was an uphill climb. It really was, like getting everything sorted out, my medication. But right now, I'm doing great.
And I would say, and I think like his psychiatrist, our families, friends would agree that like Brandon is as healthy as I've ever known him to be. Like as happy as I've ever known him to be. The best husband, the best father that I've ever known him to be. So we're in a really good place. And it's nice to, I saw this somewhere, I heard it somewhere, like when you're sharing your story with other people, you know, you like got your bags and you've got your baggage, and, you know, when you're done with it, you set your bags down, like your journey is over and you set them down so that you can help carry somebody else's bags. So when they get there, you can be like, dude, we've done that and we're here. We can help you now. Like we're on the other side. Rachel Hollis, that's totally.
Oh,
that was the analogy. That's who it was from. I got to give credit where credit was due. It was Rachel.
There you go. So, you know, Brandon, what is the biggest thing you've learned through sharing your journey online and connecting with others? Have you gotten a lot of feedback from sharing your personal journey?
What I've learned, the number one thing that I have learned is I'm not alone. There are so many other people out there that are going through the same exact things, and not even the same exact things, just people that need help, that need to talk to somebody else or go see a professional. But that's what I've learned.
Awesome. And Abby, what about you? Have you gotten a lot of feedback too from sharing all these personal journeys?
And I think honestly, one of my biggest takeaway from all of that and sharing with others and like talking to other people and learning from Brandon is it gets better. Like it gets better. Like whatever you're going through now,
there's a potential for it to.
Yep. There's the potential for it to get better. And like, the worst storms of your life can also be like the most healing and the most cleansing. And you can learn the most from them, which we for sure have.
I love that. Well, Brandon and Abby, thank you both so much for not only giving up some time to come and chat with me. I've loved following y'all online. Abby, I've loved meeting you in person. Brandon, I look forward to meeting you one day. But y'all's just honesty and genuine way that you share has just been a powerful tool. And I appreciate even tonight just how openly and honestly y'all are sharing this, because I really feel like y'all are changing lives. Y'all are impacting others who may be struggling with the same thing and now may have the hope to seek out help or hope to get better. And so thank you guys for all that you do.
Thank you so much for having us, Todd. We really appreciate it. And we will see you Orlando, Phoenix.
Yes, both of them.
We'll be there.
There we go. So, and thank you to all of the listeners and viewers as well for joining every week. Remember, you can join every single week as I release a new episode of different people who I've invited on to tell their story. Don't forget to get out there, be brave, and share some of your story as well, because you just might save someone's life. Have a great night, everybody.